After South Korea proposed last week $75,000 per baby that a family has, Japan is in desperate need, okay? And they are calling all black men, specifically immigrants, to come and impregnate their women so that they can save their dying population. I don't understand because, black men were once and still is on the inner side of the line, which means their lives. I mean, what are you going to guarantee us if we send our men over there to help save you? Could you imagine? Think about this. After everything they put us through, everything, y'all trying to take these men out. Now you need them to repopulate the earth? The United States is responsible for what's going on over there in Japan. Why should we be held responsible? And get this, they ain't even paying no money to do it. They're just saying, please, black men, immigrants, please come have babies with our women. Here's the thing. We're going to need to run some tests because it could be from what happened years ago as to why their population is down. You know what I'm saying? That stuff's still in the soil. It's still in the air. You already know what I'm talking about. What's that white man's name that thought it was a genius idea to create the biggest bullet in the world? Oppenheimer. Yeah, that's his name. So why is it that, y'all called him this, y'all called him that, you enslaved and you did this, and now you ain't calling for white men. You calling for to come save your community. And I'm going to go over there and I'm going to start me a negotiation firm over there in Asia and stuff. And I'm going to have black men come breed with them, but they're going to get benefits. They're going to get lifetime protection from any type of child support if they decide to leave and don't want to stay in these here countries. They're going to be set for life, which means anything that these kids bring, it is going to come back directly to the black family, which means if I send Sheck over there to breed, right? Let's just say hypothetically I sent him over there on a contract breeding, anything that these kids inherit is going to come back to us. The same way they do it with these, we used to be slaves on this land out here, and anything that we work, you know what I'm saying? They own, it went back to their family. We going to start sending it back to Africa, back to the black families. That's the type of contract I need if you need the sperm. Because this one ain't dying. We going to get our kickbacks out of here. Moving on.
Welcome back to The Father's Advocate. This is The Father's Advocate, Attorney Hughes. So today we're going to be discussing a really popular topic that's been going around on social media. It's kind of old, a little bit outdated. I did do a video about this some time ago that's on YouTube and Instagram concerning this topic, and it's about Japan paying black men $75,000 to have a child with their women. Now, at first, when I started hearing about this, I wasn't that concerned because I was like, this doesn't sound like something that's relevant to the Father's Advocate. It's not going to have an impact on our mission. So I wasn't concerned. But the more and more I kept listening to more and more creators talk about this, I was like, this may actually have an impact because after all, if black fathers are leaving the United States to have children with other women, this can affect us in many ways. It can affect not only our families here, which of course have a direct impact on the Father's Advocate mission, and ultimately can have an effect on our community. So I started saying, let me do a deep dive into this, see what this is really about. I will have to say my first thought about this, like this was hogwash, like this is not real. I didn't believe it from the beginning. But so many people were saying this. I'm like, you never know, like there's things that can blow your mind and it could be real. But I did a deep dive. And I was pleasantly surprised about a lot of stuff. I was shocked about stuff. And I do plan to give you guys the information that I found. But first thing I want to say, without question, I say it all the time. Don't believe the hype. There's an old saying that says, if it sounds too good to be true, most of the times it is too good to be true. And this is one prime example of that. So again, the social media is saying that Japan is offering $75,000 to black men to be able to have children with their women. And I discovered through my research, and I did a lot of research, and that's just not true. It is the furthest thing from the truth. So Japan is not giving black men anything to make anybody's babies. That's the first thing we need to understand. And I also say, like, double check what you hear on social media, and that includes me as well. So if I say something that you guys seem to think it's not correct, bring me the evidence, and I don't mind correcting myself and admitting that I'm wrong. But in any event, I think this is just clickbait stuff that's just excited to get some folks to just something to go viral. I will also say that the person that I saw that was talking about this, I don't know if she's a comedian or not, but she made it very light. She was really funny about it. So I don't know if she believed it or not. And again, you guys have seen the video, which I posted earlier just before I start talking. So I think she was joking about it. The other folks, man, they were so not joking about it. There were some folks, some of them were men, who were also saying stuff like, there are people that appreciate black men across the world, so get your passport. And I'm just like, if there's some folks that actually believe this nonsense, then go ahead and get your passport, and you might get a rude awakening going to Japan thinking they're going to give you $75,000. But anyway, that's something for a different time. We're actually talking about whether or not this is true and what really is happening in Japan. So my research showed that Japan is offering monies to individuals to make babies. But of course, it's not black men. They're offering money to their citizen to make babies. But not only is it Japan, but it's also South Korea. And actually, that $75,000 that you may have been hearing about, that's South Korea that's actually offering $75,000. And so you may ask the question, why are they doing this? Well, it's a really, really, really important reason why they're doing that. It's actually doing it to avoid extinctions. And what that means is that their population is rapidly decreasing. So they're trying to increase their population. And they're using financial incentives to bribe women to have babies. So let's get into it. What is this all about? So, like I said, I did a lot of research. I ran across an article in The Guardian. And they were saying Japan is offering the Japanese families 1 million yen, or the equivalent of $3,600 or $3,662 per child, if they would leave the city of Tokyo and relocate to a more rural, remote town. And this offer is an increase from the previous offering of 300,000 yen, which is equivalent to about $1,907. Now, the purpose of that incentive is to reverse the population decline in those rural areas. And this offer is in addition to the 3 million yen that they were already offering families who lived in these remote areas. So in 2022, the Japanese population fell for the very first time, and they contributed this falling or this decline to the coronavirus. And as a result of the increased aging population and many young people moving to the city of Tokyo, officials believe that if they continue to do that, those areas will become depleted of anyone. So they're offering folks to just come back there to those areas to increase the population and make more babies. They said in order to qualify for this incentive, family must move outside of Tokyo and the Tokyo areas, and they must live in a home for at least 5 years in one of these rural areas, and a member of their family must be working or planning to work or open a business in this new area. And for those families that decide, I can't stay in this little remote town any longer, and they do that before the 5 years is up, then they must return the cash. Now, this financial incentive had actually started 3 years ago, and the Japanese government is concerned because despite these financial incentives, they are still having a really, really hard time convincing their people to move or relocate back to those rural, remote areas. Now, the government was expecting at least 10,000 people to take advantage of this incentive. Now, 10,000 people is not a lot of folks, but despite having been in existence for 3 years, they have only got 2,500 people who have actually taken advantage of that offering. So they're really, really concerned because even though they're offering money, it's like a bribe or something like that, people still are not interested in going back to those remote towns or increasing population. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. In terms of population, Japan suffered a record fall of 644,000 between 2020 and 2021, and that's according to Japan's government data. And it is expected the population will plummet from its current 125 million to 88 million by the year 2065. That number represents a 30% drop in just 45 years. The other concern is that the Japanese population of 65 years and older is rapidly growing while the birth rate is steadily decreasing. And it's now at an all-time low of 1.3 children per family. Now, in order for families or in order for countries to sustain what they call a sustainable population size, it is estimated that a woman or family should have at least 2.1 child per or 2.1 children per family. Right now, Japan's population or birth is 1.3. So they're behind, which means that their population status is not sustainable. And if they continue this decline, there is a great possibility that they will become extinct. The more immediate concern is that as the population get older, they're going to die off. And if there's no children born, they're not going to have a full workforce to work. So that's going to impact their economy as well, which means they won't be as strong and they're more likely susceptible to invasion. So clearly you can see that this is a major problem. In 2021, the birth rate in Japan was 811,604. That is the lowest birth rate since 1899. So without question, that's pretty serious. Now, according to a CNN article dated February 4th of this year, the decline in population is also an issue for South Korea, which I mentioned earlier. However, there is a private construction company called Buyong Group, which I may be pronouncing incorrectly. It is based in Seoul, South Korea. That company is offering 100 million Korean wons, or that big number everyone is talking about, $75,000, to its employees each time they have a child. And for employees with 3 children, the families have the option of receiving 300 million Korean won, or the equivalent of $225,000 in cash, or rental housing if the government will provide the land for construction. And this benefit is available to everyone, the men and the women, but it's for the employees. So as I said before, this incentive is for its people and its employees, not black men. So if there are some black men out here thinking they're going to go to South Korea or Japan and going to benefit from this, it's not for you, but good luck if you think so. And if you do, I would love to hear what happens in your experience. In any event, in 2022, just at 0.78, South Korea has the world's lowest fertility rate, which indicates the average number of children born to a woman in her lifetime. And as I mentioned before, in order to have a sustainable population, a woman needs to actually have 2.1 children. South Korea, as of 2022, was at 0.78. If you can just do the math, that is extremely serious. This concern plus the increasing aging population, according to the article, is feared not only by South Korea, but also by other Eastern Asian countries as well as European countries. The Buyong Group is not the only company in South Korea that is providing cash benefits to its employees, but also the government as well. And companies like Hyundai, they're also providing financial incentives. Of course, no one is providing financial assistance in the amount as close to the Buyong Group. This concern is also made in China, and China is also providing financial incentives to its citizens as well. Now, like I said, I did a lot of research. So another article I ran across is the Washington Post. And in that article, it was saying that the Korean government has tried everything to persuade women to have more babies, including providing subsidized housing for newlyweds, discounted postpartum care for new mothers, and baby payments of $2,200 for each child that is born. And then in addition to all of that, there's still many, many, many more companies, private companies that are offering financial assistance as well to help offset the financial responsibilities. Now, the fear, just like in Japan, is that if more babies are not going to be born, this is going to cut the workforce in half, if not more. The reason for the low population, according to Lee Jong-un, he is the chairman of the Buyong Group, is that there is the financial burdens of childcare and the challenges of trying to have a balanced work and family life. Now, the president of South Korea, which is Yoon Suk Yeol, and I know I butchered that name, so apologies in advance. He is praising companies for their incentives and have encouraged officials to come up with tax incentives and benefits to these companies who are providing assistance and incentives to boost the childbirth. Now, Young said in his New Year's address, he underscored the biggest challenge to the country was its demographical slump. Now, this is my commentary as well. If the president of a nation is concerned about the population, so much so that he puts it in his address, this has to be major. Okay? So while there's a lot of hoopla on social media and a lot of laughter because, like I said, it seemed like it was a joke, this is clearly not a joke for the people that are having this issue. Now, in terms of numbers, South Korea's current population is 51.6 million, but it is expected to decline by 30% to 36.2 million. And what's even more concerning, just like Japan, they have a larger population of folks that's over 65 who, like any population, they're dying out, but their birth rate is decreasing. And this outlook, according to the article, is catastrophic. And this is what the president of South Korea is saying. Some people have argued, however, that this steep decline is largely due to the stress that's put on women, who face enormous societal pressure and rampant workplace discrimination if they want to pursue a career while also wanting to be a parent. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. South Korea's male-dominated corporate culture has to fundamentally change in favor of working women, and this is what was expressed by Mr. Lee. He says Korean women will start having more babies if they do not have to sacrifice their career for it. Does that sound familiar? I think so, because that was an argument that was often made here in America. In any event, nearly half of South Korean companies disadvantaged workers using parental leave when it came to deciding promotions, according to labor ministry statistics. This male-dominated culture and the discrimination women face in South Carolina has sparked an outrage by many South Korean women, resulting in what's known as the 4B movement. This is according to the USA Today in an article dated May 9th of this year. The 4B movement is based on 4 Korean words that start with the letter B. Now, as a word of caution, up front, I tell you, I cannot speak the language, and I know I'm going to butcher these words, so I apologize in advance. The first one is bihon, and that means marriage. The second one is bishosan, that means childbirth. Bione means dating, and biseku means sex. Essentially, the women of the 4B movement are refusing to engage in heterosexual relationships, and it is a protest aimed at refusing to conform to traditional gender roles. Oh my goodness, this sounds so very, very familiar. Now, there is data and debate as to the accuracy of the movement, which many critics say it is sparked by Western media, but I'm not sure because the proof is in the pudding when you look at the population. But that's just my commentary. But in any event, this is what the article is saying, that the Western media is spreading out and giving it much more fame than it really needs to have. An interesting aspect that is discussed in the article, however, is that the dating culture in South Korea has not kept up with women's success, And I will argue that it's the same thing here in America, and particularly in the African American community. According to the article, it says that the higher a woman's social status, meaning the higher her investment in her education and her career path, the less likely she is to have mating and reproductive success. So that kind of sounds very similar to our community, which essentially says you hear a lot of this hoopla online where educated black women are not married and they're not having children. That sounds like the exact same thing happening in South Korea. Now, that's what's happening in Japan and South Korea. But as I mentioned earlier, the concern of decreased population is shared by many countries, including the United States. And this is what I found most interesting about all of this. So, in an article from The Hill, Daniel DeVisi, he argued that the white majority is aging out and pointed to the census data that has projected that Gen Z will be the last generations of American with a white majority. In his article, Daniel states that by 2045, non-Hispanic white population will fall below half of the total U.S. population. Now, I'm sure some of you guys have probably heard that. Now, while some say that this white minority is a myth, others say differently, sparking a lightning rod topic that's rooted in the nation's history of slavery and enduring patterns of discrimination against minorities and immigrants, which is similar to the events that happened in Charlottesville with white supremacists shouting, "We will not be replaced," or "You will not replace us." With respect to numbers, in the United States, non-Hispanic white men make up 77% of people over the age of 75, 67% of folks between the age of 55 and 64, 55% of folks between the age of 35 and 44, and barely half of folks between the age of 18 and 24. America's white children are only 47%, and this is according to an article from the Brookings Institution. It's actually from the senior fellow, William Frey, at the Brookings Institution. Another issue with this belief is that there's a growing phenomenon that many folks are now identifying themselves as multiracial. And as this continue to grow with folks identifying as multiracial, it is believed that the number of reported white Americans also will decrease, which makes their population like it's lower than what it actually is. What's interesting that I find about this phenomenon is that it turns that one drop rule on its head. So if you guys remember, in America, if you have supposedly one drop of black blood in you, you're black. So now folks are taking it to the head. They're essentially saying, well, I got more than one drop of blood in me and it's something other than white, so I'm not white. So what started off as something beneficial to slave masters or slave owners is now having a really negative effect on their population. In a nutshell, America white population, like South Korea and other East Asian countries, is decreasing, with the nation's median white age at being 38.9, which is actually the highest it has ever been. The minimum age of white American is rising because white birth rate is falling. The concern is that this population trend threatens to deplete the American workforce for white Americans. That means fewer workers mean less growth, which is also the concerns in Japan and South Korea and other East Asian countries, as well as some European nations. Now, Nigel Roberts, who is a journalist from The Hill, he echoed these sentiments and noted that the census data indicates that the white American population declined between 2010 and 2020 in age groups below 55. Demographers attribute the white population decrease and younger generation to increased birth rates and immigration among people of color, but more significantly, to baby boomers entering their senior age rings. Now, despite America's decline for the white population, to my knowledge, there are no financial incentives being offered to have more white babies, at least not at this time. However, The Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. So there is a belief that despite there not being any financial incentive, the fact that women can no longer make choices with their own bodies and they are forced to have children, even in cases of rape in some states, this is a way to increase the white birth population. So you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with Black Americans, Black fathers, and the mission of the Father's Advocate? Well, guess what, guys? Guess whose population is not a threat of being wiping out? At least not at this time. You freaking guessed it. Yes, Black Americans and Black folks, even in the continent of Africa, is not at risk of its population dying out, at least at this time. In fact, according to Pew Research Center, the Black population in the United States is growing. In 2022, there was an estimated 47.9 million people who self-identified as Black, making up 14.4% of the country's population. This marks a 32% increase since 2000, when there were 36.2 million Black people living in the United States. Now, of course, there are a lot of folks that will disagree with this population size and will believe that the African American or Black population is significantly higher than 14.4%, and I am one of those persons. But based on the article, this is essentially saying that our population has increased since 2022, which in my opinion is a good thing. In 2022 also, there were 5.1 million foreign-born Black Americans. About 11% of that represented the U.S. Black population. This is also an increase from 2000, when it was only 2.4 million people, or 7% among Black population that were foreign-born. The United States population of Black folks is also very young, which is awesome, which means we got plenty of years. The median age of Black people in 2022 was only 32.1%, which is nearly 6 years younger than the total U.S. population in that same group, which is actually 38. Roughly 30% of the entire Black population was below the age of 20, while only 12% were 65 years or older. Even more stalking is that in 2022, Black women between the ages of 15 and 44 gave birth to 640,000 babies. This represents 6.1%, which is significantly higher compared to other racial groups. Now, this is good in terms of population size, but there are some things that as Black Americans we need to be concerned about, because despite our population size, there is still issues with wealth gap, health, income disparity. Those things are still an issue. Other things that are an issue that concerns us that also might hinder our population is violence, police brutality, and believe it or not, the food that we eat. A lot of the stuff that we eat now in this country is not real food, and some of the stuff that we eat is actually damaging to our health and also to our children. There is discussion that some foods that we eat a lot in our community actually create sterilization in both women and men. So be careful what you eat. That's what I can tell you. So what is the significance of this information, and why should you care, right? So for me, I think that it's very important to know that this is one less issue that we as African American or Black people have to deal with. And this is particularly so since we have so many other ills we deal with here. For instance, we have police brutality, we got discrimination, we got wealth gap, we got income disparity, we got the health issues. We have all kinds of issues that we deal with. And in addition to that, we have internal warfares like colorisms, which I thought was a non-issue. I didn't think that was something that we still deal with. In addition to that, we got alpha men versus beta men. We got women who are accused of being masculine. We got educated women who there's a belief they don't need a man. You have single mothers and fatherless children. We have all kinds of issues in our communities that we really need to be dealing with. But this is one thing we don't have to deal with. And the other thing, there is a positive push for positive living. There's this push for economic independence. There's this push to buy at the block. There's this push for entrepreneurship, a push for generational wealth, gatekeeping our culture, Blaxit, and recapturing the Black family. I think the fact that this is one less issue that we have to deal with, we need to harness this. And the way I look at it, since everybody else in the world want what we have, they want our population, they want our size, they want our age, they want our numbers. This is quite similar to our culture. Our culture is unique. We're the only folks on the planet Earth that have these unique hairstyles, our braids, our locks, our hair extensions, our afros, our style of dress, our speech, our language, even the way we cook, our music, which is being sampled and used all over the world, even in different language, like for instance, K-pop. The beautiful array of skin tones that we have that people sit under the sun and purchase products for, and darn near kill themselves to have our skin tone. People love what we have. And oftentimes we don't realize what we have until we see someone else have it. And then they're starting trying to gatekeep what we got, telling us we can't have it. Like, for instance, country music. That's our stuff. So we got a big population that's continuously growing, and we have a young population. We need to harness this. And the question is, how do we harness this? Well, again, with this positive living, positive push, and even the push to have fathers back in the home. And that doesn't mean they got to be in a home with mom. That just means they're back with their children and they're active with their children. I think that's the first step. I personally think having a child to have both parents, a mom and a dad that's active in their life, can create and produce well-rounded, whole children. And that will also make the parents whole as well, make them better folks. Back to the question at hand is whether Japan is offering money to Black men to impregnate their women. The answer is unadulterated no. Neither is South Korea. Nobody's offering Black men to make babies with their children. And really the question is, why would they anyway? I just can't believe anybody would should believe this. But anyway, there are folks that are doing this because, like I said, I saw several folks on social media that were essentially saying Black men are not appreciated in America, so they should go elsewhere where they can be appreciated. And quite frankly, I just think that is the most dangerous advice that can be given to folks, especially when the information is inaccurate and completely just false. But what Japan and South Korea are doing, they're offering money to increase their population size. They're trying to get women to agree to have more babies so that their population and their people can stay relevant and still compete, because otherwise their population is going to decrease and there is this chance of extinction. Of course, nobody wants their folks to die off. Anyway, I hope you find this information helpful, informative, and entertaining. Until next time, this is the Father's Advocate, Attorney Hughes. And like I always leave you, don't stop fighting. Your children do need you.